everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are doing a little bit of a flashback review, or retro review if you will. We started our channel in May of 2017, so there are a lot of sequels of things coming out this year that we didn't review beforehand. So I think this year we kind of want to go back and do reviews of the older movies in the series before we do the new one coming out. So today we're doing Maze Runner.
So the newest one, the third and final movie, The Death Cure, I believe comes out in, what, a week?
Week or two?
Yeah, end of January, Death Cure is coming out, and so we wanted to go back. It's been a while since we watched either of them, and I think the last time we watched number 2 in the series was in theaters when it released. So we wanted to go back. We did enjoy those movies the first time, and we wanted to give you guys our thoughts.
This movie is based on a book series. I have read the first book in the series and half of the second book. We'll talk about that in our Scorch Trials review. But Maze Runner, I really loved the book, and I honestly think that this was a pretty good book-to-movie adaptation, and I really enjoyed the first movie just as a movie in and of itself.
Yeah, I have not read the book, so my only experience with this franchise is the movies, and the first movie, yeah, overall I really enjoyed. I thought it was a very interesting concept, and there's a lot of, like, intrigue and interesting things going on. It was very unique.
Yeah, that's how I felt when I was reading the book, and this movie is paced, I think, pretty well for what it is. I mean, you have, like, one set piece for 90% of the movie until the very, very end, and so they do a good job of staying within this small realm and also introducing a lot of characters and still having it, like, make sense.
That's true, and I mean, I think Dylan O'Brien does a great job. I think this is, like, his first, like, movie role that he ever did.
Maybe. I don't remember.
His first, like, major movie role. Like, definitely as the lead. Yeah, rolling into theaters, and I thought he did a good job with it. He's such a little baby in this, and it's pretty funny to watch. But I thought everyone did a good job, and for the amount of characters they pull on screen.
I will say this movie did something a little bit better than, maybe not even better, but different than the book. So in the book, because the book is done from Thomas's perspective, the main characters, and this is a spoiler-free review, just FYI, but because you're in his head and he doesn't know what's going on, you don't know what's going on, and it was aggravating as hell for the first, like, third of the book, but, like, it was a good way to, like, go through it. And the movie, you don't get that so much, because you're seeing it from an outside perspective, not strictly from Thomas's view. So I thought that that was a better, like, movie viewing experience.
No, I completely agree, and I thought overall they did a good job about giving you little bits as you went, and so even by the end you're not really sure what's going on.
You're not supposed to.
Yeah, it's a pretty trippy movie, especially by the end you're like, what? But they do a good job of revealing things as you learn with the characters.
Speaking of the characters, I do think that they balanced out people pretty well in this movie. There's a lot of side characters you, like, really aren't even introduced to just because there's a whole bunch of people in the maze. But the main characters that they focused on, I feel like they gave you just enough backstory on them for you to connect, and people that they didn't give very much on was intentional, and so I don't feel like there was any holes in that regard.
Yeah, and we both felt like our favorite character is Minho, which is the lead runner, and I enjoy his character more than the lead characters.
He should be the lead character.
He's funnier, he's wittier, and he
more
does more things. Yeah, but overall, the characters, I think they do a good job of bringing the different personalities to the group. And one thing I noticed that was always funny is they tend to frame the shots in this movie very much like every scene could be like a poster, and I think I mentioned this throughout both of them, is every scene has, like, everyone, like, in the scene, like, behind it. And it's very,
shots.
Yeah, it's very humorous, but in that way, everyone kind of gets their time to shine, and you get to know the different characters, because they're all in, like, every scene.
One thing in this movie that wasn't the best, but also wasn't the worst, and I feel like this happens a lot with dystopian-type movies, especially big franchises, is just the exposition. I think that it was not bad for the way it is in this movie, but there are some scenes where it's like, we're going to explain this piece to you now.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the first half of the film does a much better job of showing than telling. In fact, most of the characters don't tell anything because he's constantly going, what's this? What's this? And they're like, oh, you'll see. And they do that obnoxious thing where they don't say it when they could easily just tell him what's going on. And so they do more showing, but as you go, I feel like they start to tell more and more, especially egregious at the end. And she called out while we were rewatching it. she was like, exposition, because there's a good 5-minute scene at the
Oh,
end
at the end,
where
yeah.
this person just describes everything that's gone on.
Well, it's because the end of this movie is technically the beginning of the second book, so they rearranged that a little bit.
But yeah, they start to tell more by the end, but they did a good job at first. So this movie came out right around the beginning of like the Hunger Games dystopian teen phase of films. I feel like where every
Hunger
series,
Games, Divergent, Maze Runner.
yeah, they all started popping out because they're like, oh, this is popular. Hunger Games is making lots of money, and I don't necessarily feel like this one was a cash-in. I think it sets itself apart with a unique setting. I think it's more unique than like Hunger Games. I would also say that in terms of a concept, the movie is surprisingly like darker, I think, than Hunger Games. For a movie about kids killing each other, it's still pretty PG.
The first one, particularly.
Whereas this movie is surprisingly dark. Like, if you went in expecting, like, a Hunger Games level where it's very, I guess, digestible. But there are some moments that are, like, pretty harsh and, like, lots of kids getting straight murdered by big creatures and stuff.
It has high stakes, as a dystopian of this nature should, in my opinion. As the title suggests, there is quite a lot of running in this movie. There's a lot of chase scenes and just running scenes, and I don't know, I think they were all right.
Yeah, I think this film actually does a pretty good job at their chase scenes, I think. I didn't quite realize how much of a staple of the franchise it is, which is very funny because it's called The Maze Runner. Mm-hmm. But yeah, this movie, and especially since we watched this one and the second one, you notice, wow, like, most of the scenes are chase scenes. They run a lot, and so I think that's kind of a cool like staple to have throughout the series.
The Doctor Who effect. You just run all the time. This is a movie where you don't know who or what the villain is until very close to the end of the first movie, and that does very much heavily lead into the second one. And in this first movie particularly, I feel like the villain is not that strong. Like, the mystery of the villain is strong, but like the actual villain is not really that strong in the first one. I think that's something you definitely see a lot more of the second one, which we will talk about in our Scorched Trials review. But yeah, they introduce it kind of late towards the end, and even then it's not very clear, like the motivations or anything like that. It's very much a mystery, which is how the series of books is set up as well. So I guess it matches that, but it's just very interesting to not have like a clear-cut dystopian villain. Whereas like with Hunger Games and Divergent, you have the government. And this is along those veins, but it's not quite as clear cut, especially in the first movie, whereas I feel like the first two movies of Hunger Games and Divergent very clearly tells you who the villain is and who they're fighting against.
Which I do think that is a weakness of like teen dystopian fiction anyways, because it's always this big shadowy organization, whether it's the government or something else. And instead of like a personalized like villain who's doing something bad, it's not like some evil guy just dumped them all there and is like torturing them. It's like a much bigger scheme than that.
That's the point of dystopian, is that it's not a single villain, it's society.
So yeah, but that ends up making the villain aspect weaker because they have no one to interact with except giant creatures.
Yeah, it's very ambiguous in the first one, and that makes it a little hard for you to like you're rooting for the main characters, but at the same time you're like, I don't know who I'm rooting for you against quite yet. Overall, I think this movie is enjoyable. I would recommend watching it if you want to watch like a fun kind of turn your brain off dystopian teen movie. It's fun.
Yeah, I would say that this movie is a fun watch. It actually has a surprising amount of like heart and feelings, but it doesn't take itself quite like too seriously. There's some fun in there and adventure along with the dark stuff we talked about earlier. And yeah, it's not like a perfect film or anything, but I think we enjoyed watching it and we'll probably end up watching it again. As always, guys, we care what you guys have to say about movies. Have you seen the Maze Runner series? Did you like the first one? Let us know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like. It really helps us out and we appreciate it. And subscribe. Like we said, we're going to be having the rest of the Maze Runner series reviews on here. And we have a ton of different content for you as well. And if you want to watch those, you guys can click right over there and we'll see you next time.